Welcome everybody to this very first edition of the ALPFA, Association of Latino Professionals for America, our first member webinar. Eventually this benefit is going to be remain open to all members, but the recording will be behind the login on alpha.org. So you'll need to be a member to log into alpha.org to access the recording. And then in the future, we'll have premium member webinars that are only open to premium members. And as I said, as we get this started and underway, we are offering this to all of our members and guests today. And we have with us our Chief Marketing Officer, Luis Vargas. Welcome, Luis.
Hi, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Really excited to be here. This is our first of many of the webinars that we're planning to put together for you related to all marketing areas and functions. So really excited to have Steven here with us, talking to us about using competitive intelligence in your digital marketing. Really looking forward to hear the good information and good data that he has, and looking forward to having you join us in future webinars that we're going to be putting together for you guys.
Thank you. And I also want to welcome now Stephen Groves, who is a longtime friend and advisor. I have had many conversations with Stephen, both in business environments as well as around an amazing dinner table. He's a foodie at heart and loves to cook and to find all the great places no matter where he is. So if you're ever in his neck of the woods, you know that he will show you an excellent dinner as well. I encourage you to take advantage of it. But Stephen is here today because of his expertise in the digital marketing world, and I am honored to introduce him today as our first webinar guest. And Stephen, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell people what you believe is most important for them to know today as we get started on the webinar. And just in case you missed the notifications in the chat window, you can download the handouts from your control panel. There's a handout of 2 slides per page, a PDF available in the handout section of your control panel. And we're going to close our webcams after Stephen gets us underway to save the bandwidth so that you see what's most important on the screen. But we wanted to welcome you personally to the Association of Latino Professionals for America first ever member benefit webinar. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you very much, Luis. I appreciate the welcome to everybody coming in today. Really excited about being the inaugural speaker, too. As Lori mentioned, her and I have known each other for a while. Luis and I have shared a couple of meals together, and just really thrilled about being able to work with the ALPFA members today. And even if you're not an ALPFA member, you should be. I became a professional member last year, and it's really been an awesome organization. It's been excellent in terms of the people that I've met here, and certainly the contribution to my professional development has been substantial. So let me thank you again, Luis. Let me thank you again, Lori.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and close our webcam.
Nice to have you.
Stephen.
All right, so Lori and Luis, I'm hoping everybody can see the screen okay. We've got the slide up, and if you can see the first slide that talks about using competitive intelligence in your digital marketing, then we should be ready to go. Feel free to leave messages in the chat window if you can't see something or if something's not working, but we're going to go ahead and get going, barring any other conversation. Little bit of introduction on my behalf, and that is that I'm the published author of the ROI of social media. And when we talk about ROI in this context, we're talking exactly about the return on investment, and that is the dollars that people spend, and that's the dollars that that people need to get back on that media spend. So it's really been a question. That was kind of the introduction, or kind of the start of my journey down the path of this question of what is the payoff on social media. I mean, it's Facebook. Why would you spend a nickel on it, right? It's social. It's free. And of course, when we wrote the book, things have changed since then. The book came out in 2011. That's when John Wiley and Sons published it around the world. And actually the launch party we held in Kuala Lumpur in the Microsoft offices there in KL, and it was quite the experience to be able to connect with people in that part of the world and talk a little bit about how this ROI question was being answered. We interviewed dozens of people in terms of how they would go about measuring their ROI at the time, and that included people from Microsoft as well as Dell, as well as allrecipes.com and Comcast, and just really some of the people that today have demonstrated the standard in terms of the way things are measured. I was also technical editor for the Secrets of Social Media Metrics that John Lovett published. So in that respect, it's really been this journey in terms of how do you measure social media, why do you measure social media, and what's the benefit for business. My co-author on the ROI of social media, Guy Powell, and I started Pro-Relevant Marketing Solutions after the book came out because we had technology that we had acquired in terms of being able to help answer this question. One of them is really targeted at the enterprise. That's MarketSim. It's actually a market simulator based on a Nobel Prize award-winning model on how consumers actually make decisions. It's called MarketSim, and in my work in another area, we came to develop the Preznc report for online optimization, and that is not just a tool; it's also a tactic, and that's what we're going to go into in depth today. Is the tactic that's behind Preznc report. So after this discussion today, my objective is that you're at least well prepared to understand how to go out and do this kind of work for yourself, or take a look at whether or not it might be optimal for us to be able to work with you in doing so. But that's kind of the introduction. Anything else to add to that, Lori, as we move forward, or are we just moving on from here?
I think that's really good. Again, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but if you have questions, please place them in the question box on the control panel, on the webinar control panel, and we'll take questions at the end. In the meantime, if you have any immediate needs, please raise your hand. And Yolanda, I see that your hand is raised, so if you'll check your chat box, and I'll be able to help you directly. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so off we go. So the reason why we invented Preznc report is because it really came clear that digital marketing, by and large, is broken. There's too little time to do all the things that are necessary or all the things that you might want to do in social media, and the expertise required continues to escalate. And there's too few strategies that really address that issue in terms of being able to focus your limited time and resources. And of course, there's this quote from John Wanamaker that I think most marketers in the audience are going to be familiar with. And John Wanamaker once said that, "I know half my marketing is wasted, I just don't know which half." But that was back in the day. That was back around the turn of the century when marketing consisted of advertisements in the store or in the local newspaper, or publishing catalogs that you send out, and you hope that people will open them up, will scan through them, and will place an order. Of course, back in those days, the order was placed via mail. So that's where Wanamaker was coming from. But I also want you to hear that John Wanamaker was an innovator when it came to marketing. He hired the first ever copywriter in the world. So he's the guy that started us down this path of optimizing our media and optimizing our marketing effectiveness. But you know, when it comes to what's possible in social media, it's an ocean. It really is just about every type of possible capability, and as marketers, what we have to deal with is, where do I go next? And that's really what this kind of a survey, that's what this kind of research can show us, because it's in an ocean of what's possible in social that you really are looking for that island to swim to. If you're looking for the shore that says, here's where you need to go, it's better to find that shore, go at it, than just tread water in an ocean. So we're going to talk about some of the tools, tactics, and strategies that get us from just paddling water, just treading water, to being able to actually know where we should be going next and actually understand why we should be going that way. So that's our objective today. We start with the idea that competitive information allows us to know, act, and win. And what we mean when we say know, act, and win, we can know where to focus. We can know which social platforms matter and where those conversations are. We can know which engagement option we will need to provide to our audience. We can act on that information. We can act in a cadence that is either daily, weekly, or monthly, but which is important for our audience? That's kind of the question that we want to answer in advance. So once we start knowing where to engage, where the conversations are, and which engagement options need to be provided, we can act in a cadence and we can win again in the battle of social media. We can win against those competitors that are also trying to be found, not only in digital, but also in search and also in the areas that matter to our audience. So competitive information provides support in those kinds of areas. But when we're talking about competitive information, Steve, what's that competitive information look like? Well, we start in 3 different areas. We start in this model called POEMS, and POEMS is not something that we invented. This is an acronym that represents the areas for digital marketers like you and I to sort of focus our time and intention. It starts with paid, and that's what the P in POEMS stand for, is paid. And paid is not necessarily the end-all, do-all, but it's an important leg of the stool. If you think about all 3 of these, paid, owned, operated, and earned, as legs of a stool, you start realizing that paid is just one of those tools that we can take to the fight. Don't want to show up without the right tools, don't want to show up without the right weapons versus our competitors, and paid is one of those elements. Second is owned and operated, and these are the websites, the elements that we own and we operate online on behalf of the company, on behalf of the brands, on behalf of the individuals that make up our online presence. And it's really the target of everything we do. We want to drive attendance, we want to drive conversations, we want to drive visitors to our owned and operated property. It's where we need to invest our search engine optimization dollars so that we're getting that traffic to our owned and operated presence. And then there's earned, and earned is where a lot of digital marketers today spend their time. Earned includes off-site and social platforms, and we're going to talk about those. So when it comes to on-site, we need to understand what metrics are relevant. And when we're talking about which metrics are relevant, inevitably we have to talk about what the Google gods are looking for. I say the Google gods, obviously they're just the people that make decisions, but the other part of our understanding of on-site is that those metrics and engagement measures are being determined for us by the Google bots. There's not a human being looking at our website at Google going, well, that's a good keyword. That's a good keyword. No, that's not a good keyword at all. There's no human being doing that. So by understanding that, we can start understanding what the bots are looking for and we start optimizing in that direction. When it comes to engagement as well, we're talking about a scenario where that used to be in the not too distant past that websites could be a set and forget. It could be kind of like an electronic brochure. But those days have really gone past us already. Now the visitors to our website are looking for some form of engagement, and ideally, well, and what we've been able to do is identify 18 to 20 different engagement options that can show up on a website, and understanding those particular engagement options, understanding what we can affordably support, and that's a key here, is what's affordable in terms of the organizational support, is important. Off-site, we're talking about social platforms. Which ones do we need to develop? When do we need to develop them? Because it might be important down the line, but maybe not important now. When it comes to paid, we want to start understanding whether or not AdWords are even being bought by ourselves, by our organization. And we also want to understand whether or not maybe our competitors are buying those AdWords, and how many of those AdWords are they investing in. So those are the ways that we're going to consider the 3 legs of the stool, of the, as you were. This is where, again, the POEMS construct comes in. So it's paid, owned, earned, media services makes up the acronym of POEMS. So let's talk about that owner and operator for a moment. And this is kind of like understanding where our company ranks. And the other question is, what keywords does Google see us ranking for? It's one thing to want to rank for a particular phrase, but it's another thing to consider which keywords your prospects are using. So we want to know which keywords our prospects are using, which keywords the audience is using, and which of those we rank for. And if we're not ranking for the ones that are being used, then how do we get there? Why we rank in that position? Keywords is one of those questions, but it's not all that it's made up of. The Google search engine optimization ranking algorithm is made up of 200 different elements, but we don't always know which 200 of those are ranked where. Google protects that information pretty closely. It's kind of like the formula for Coke or the 57 herbs and spices that the Colonel uses. They're highly protected trade secrets, and we get to know some of those things that Google uses, but we don't ever get to know all of them. And then last off is that we're starting to see the emergence of a spam metric. And this means that we can identify 17 separate elements that might be considered by a Google bot as determining whether or not the site is a spam site. Those are things that we start looking at as well now. Now, what tools are we using to help support that process? And I'm going to talk about tools for a moment. But these are the types of things that go into the work that we do. SEMrush, SEOquake, and Moz. Some of these require investment. Some of them are free. GTmetrix is another one that helps us understand how our pages are being loaded and what's impacting that page load time. And then Screaming Frog, and what a wonderful name, Screaming Frog. Creates all kinds of visualizations. But Screaming Frog is a really great tool that will crawl your entire site and show you every single link you have. And every picture is a link, every link from one page to another, all matter. We also then used a trained researcher. Now, you don't need to be trained, but certainly over time you start being trained. When it comes to being able to do this quickly and efficiently for people, we use trained researchers that have tools and survey equipment. They do the physical inspection for what constitutes engagement. They also help us understand recency and frequency when it comes to our social presence. Because if we understand how often our competitors are using their site and what the frequency is that they're using their site, or using the social aspect, then we can start understanding what's been successful for them and maybe what might be successful for us. When we talk about earned, here's where Waldo comes in. This is where we start searching for where our customer is. We know, I mean without a doubt, we know that our customer is on Facebook. That's one thing that we can certainly come to understand. And how we know that is because 1.65 billion people on the planet are in Facebook. Saw that statistic just the other day that Facebook released their annual results. So 1 in 6 on the planet is using Facebook today. Almost the same number is using WeChat, but a lot of us here in the US, we tend to focus on Twitter. Twitter's about 500,000 or 500 million in terms of usage. LinkedIn is a $400 million business-to-business only platform. And if you're a B2B company, of course, that's where your audience is going to be. And some of the things that we find when we do these competitive research for clients is we're finding that they don't always think about where these platforms could take them or whether or not their audience is in there. So is the competition there? Are they engaged? And by understanding whether or not they have a presence there, whether or not, and how we understand how they're using it in terms of, are they posting there, how big of a following do they have there, are they finding their audience there, and if they're not finding their audience there, it might keep us from wasting a lot of time trying to connect with an audience that doesn't exist in that platform. So being able to do that research is essential, but here's the challenge. Digital marketers in the audience will know that Twitter has recently degraded their feed. We no longer get total number of posts and a good deal of other information out of our Twitter feeds. Twitter's taken it away. But at the same time, we don't get feeds from LinkedIn, Facebook gives us a feed. I have seen some information in terms of Google Plus information, but a lot of this data isn't available via API, which is why the trained researcher becomes so essential, or somebody on your staff that can go out and actually look at this stuff and start collecting that information so that you will start understanding what's ready. Last off is we can talk about the paid side of things. Now, when we talk about paid, we start talking about search engine marketing, and this is the Google AdWords world. And when we talk about Google AdWords, we start understanding whether or not, we can understand whether or not anybody in the competitive set is using paid media. Why are they using paid media? What trigger keywords are they using, and what kind of investment are they using? Are they having to come up with to be able to support that aspect of their online presence? The value of those ads, though, is variable. Everybody is talking about how we can use those seen and clicked percentages, but one thing that we often find in talking to businesses is that they're focusing in on the seen and clicked percentage, and in many cases, most cases, that seen and clicked percentage is oftentimes a fraction of a percentage. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, though. I want to talk for just a moment about reach and conversion and the value of a seen and not clicked ad. Seen and not clicked ads allow us to sort of present our message to an audience, but they didn't click on it. Now, what's the value of that? Well, the statistic and data shows that a consumer and even a B2B buyer will not buy the first time they visit a website. They're just simply not going to go from just becoming aware of you to suddenly purchasing what it is you have, unless maybe you're just selling a pack of gum and you're offering a pack of gum on a reduced rate. But if it's seen and not clicked, we still get a function of awareness. And this is a statistic that oftentimes gets lost on digital marketers, and certainly gets lost when it comes to being able to understand by management why you're spending money on advertising that doesn't seem to be paying off. Well, that click is a function of what's called last click attribution, last touch attribution. And last touch attribution sort of puts all of the weight of a successful program towards just that last click. But reality is that if you're advertising, they've seen that ad several times before they click. So being able to get away from the single metric of last click attribution or last touch attribution and into a broader understanding of the value of your entire ad investment is an essential component. Last off, I'm going to talk for a moment about the unseen ads, because there's an awful lot of information that's out there that is never seen by human beings. And this is the bot ad fraud that we have heard so much about. The industry is working to address ad fraud, but it's still a real challenge. And being able to conquer that and being able to get around that is really a huge challenge. But there are tactics for being able to understand, number one, the value of those seen and not clicked, and then also being able to track and attribute the proper value of an ad to the various ways that you go to market. It's not part of this type of a process, but I'm just here to comment that that type of an attribution, that type of an assessment is available. So there's a poll that we have ready to go here. Lori, if you've got that poll ready, why don't we go ahead and move that into the audience. So the organizer must close the screen. Okay, so if I pause, I guess I'm paused now. Lori, on to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, perfect. The poll is open, and it's a pretty interesting one. We also had a question via Twitter while we're waiting for the poll, Stephen, and SM currently asked, do B2B and or B2C companies use this kind of intelligence?
The answer is yes. Actually, I have had a great deal of success in terms of offering this intelligence to B2B companies because so many B2B companies don't have access to the same tactics that consumer-oriented companies have. So B2B companies can use this to great effect. B2C companies use it to good effect as well, and the opportunity for a B2C company can't hardly be second-guessed, just simply because your audience is online. The consumer is very strongly online. So if we've got a B2C company and a B2B company, both of them will benefit from this competitive comparison.
Excellent. And the poll is now closed and showing on the screen. And the question was, what would your organization pay for this kind of, or invest in this kind of an analysis? And I have seen this question asked before, this kind of a question asked before, and I think that over the years that I've seen this kind of question asked, that it's changed a little bit, but not significantly. And if you're, Stephen, for you, because you're actually presenting as opposed to viewing the webinar, if you look at your audience view, you may be able to see that, or go to Webinar Viewer. But the majority, 42%, said that their company would invest nothing in this kind of intelligence. 25% said $500 to $1,000. 17% each said $2,500 to $5,000 and $5,000 plus. So I can see that the value proposition has changed. It used to be, when we first started asking questions like this, that the higher register was not ever mentioned, but I think that people are starting to see the value of this kind of intelligence. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lori. I appreciate that. Okay, and if you're still showing the results, then I need to show the screen again.
Okay. There you go.
All right. So why the comparison? Well, number one is, of course, we can talk about the relative value relative to being able to just understand, but let's talk about why that comparison really helps us move so quickly. Well, because we can focus on where it's going to matter most. We talked earlier about the idea that if we're online, we're not competing against Microsoft and Google to be found. We might have products that compete and it can be found on others, on other buying websites, things like Amazon or Alibaba or whatnot. But in the B2B realm, of course, it helps us then understand where we can matter most, where to focus so that so it will matter most. We're not competing against Microsoft, we're not competing against Google, we're competing against this defined set of competitors. To be able to understand where we need to focus. Do I need to be on Facebook? Do I need to be on LinkedIn? Do I need to have a YouTube channel? And understanding how the competitors are using those same platforms and maybe siphoning off our prospects and our customers. If we understand that it's working for them, it can certainly work for us. And that's where it'll save us a lot of time and a lot of trial and error if we just understand that that's where our audience is already and that those are the tools and tactics that are being utilized. That research cost by yourself could take hours and hours of the staff's time. And by being able to then invest in a tactic that does it quicker and keeps the team focused, that's where we can get a real benefit. The benefit sort of weighs in like the story of bears, of a bear in the woods and a group of hikers going down a trail in the forest, and that as the trail in the forest turns, it opens up into this beautiful big glade. Well, over about 200 yards on the other side of the glade is this bear, and the bear is sitting in a pile of berries, and he's really enjoying himself. But what do you think bears like better than berries? So as we come out of the forest, you could imagine that that group of hikers is you and the competitors. And as we come out of that forest, we're making noise and talking about baseball and football and how well the Broncos did last year. Go Broncos. And we're not paying attention. But the bear is, and the bear notices people coming out of the forest, and he notices, of course, that with all the noise, how could he not notice? So he gets up on his haunches and starts running towards the group of hikers. Well, the person in front sees the bear first and turns and runs away. That's exactly what they do first. The second guy sitting there wringing his hands, oh my gosh, there's a bear, there's a bear. And the third guy looks at us, and we're strapping up a pair of running shoes. And he says, what are you doing? You can't outrun the bear. And we look up at this potential bear food and say, you know, we don't really need to outrun the bear. We just need to outrun you. And what happens, of course, is the bear will catch whoever falls behind and the rest of the group will get away. So this is the same kind of scenario that we're not competing against the biggest properties on the internet. We're not competing against the websites that are ranked 10 or 9. We're competing against those other websites that are ranked 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those are the guys that we want to try to make sure that as we understand how well they're doing in search, we have to just do better than them. So that's the idea behind why this type of competitive research is going to help us so much. Helps us focus on where we're going to get the most effect and helps us save time so that we're not investing in platforms that aren't going to get us to our goal. So adding it all up. So poems is helps us understand where the biggest challenges are, and we also get to understand where the low-hanging fruit is. We get to understand where we're strong and where we lag. Where can we make the most immediate improvement? We can also understand who's catching up behind us and who's trying to improve to outrun us in that race against the bear, so to speak. This is also where we start understanding what the best practices are around SEO and keywords. There's a lot of great tools directly available from the people at Google who help us understand, that will help us understand why we're ranking where we're ranking and how to rank better. That's the important part of that. How do we create that brand awareness in an online presence so that that awareness drives the top of the funnel? The top of the funnel in terms of people understanding that we exist, that we have products and services that matter to them, that's at the top of the funnel. That's what we want to use our best practices for. And whether it's B2B or B2C, there's an engagement option that's going to matter most. It could be a webinar, but you know, consumers rarely attend webinars. B2B often attend webinars and use webinars as part of their engagement tactic, and it's an effective tactic for B2B. So the tools that we use, well, this conversation hasn't been about which tools we use. I mean, we pointed at them and indicated them, but the really important aspect is the data that they provide. And a lot of that information is available without investing in a tool. You can go find it through one thing or another. But then again, there's always going to be that function of time that's hard to recover. In fact, once you make the investment of time, you never recover it. So that's the kind of effort that it takes to be able to put a good competitive assessment to work for the organization. What we'd like to do is thank you on behalf of the people at ALPFA. We'd certainly like to thank you on behalf of ProRelevant, the company that I and my partner be able to run. Now, though, I'm going to hand it back to Lori and see if there's questions that might have come up during the presentation that we should be trying to address. And if so, then I'll do my best to try to answer them for you. Lori?
So thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everybody. I just turned my webcam back on so you can see us again. And Andy Cohen has a question. Where do you see companies struggling the most? Where do you see companies struggling the most?
You know, that's a great question, Andy. So when we see people, when we get to deal with clients and do this report, and this report has been done hundreds of times, and we've seen thousands of online presence, online profiles, where we tend to see people struggling most is understanding how their website needs to be constructed. And that includes the engagement options, not just, you know, as are the web pages well structured so they're SEO optimized each time, but what kind of engagement options. And where we see people struggling is identifying the appropriate engagement options, investing in them in an appropriate way, and then making sure that as people engage with you on the website, because that's the destination for all our behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the destination when we're involved in social. We want people to visit our website so we can create more of a private conversation. So I would have to say, Andy, that it's going to be on the website. If they're not engaging on the website and investing the appropriate amount of effort in terms of managing and maintaining that website, they're going to see a decrease in terms of awareness and the ability to be able to present their service to people. So that's my thought.
Well, that falls right in line with the second question. Does build it and they will come still apply to my website?
You know, I love that question, because if we build a well-optimized website, certainly the Googlebots are going to come. That's what Googlebots do. That's how they live. The question about whether or not our audience is going to find us is relative to how niche-y is our product and service. And then the other part is that if I just build a website and don't engage in social, or don't decide to invest in SEM, search engine marketing, paid media, my audience will find me maybe relative to SEO, but one of the aspects of being found in search today is our online presence. Google looks at whether or not you're active in their platform, but they're also looking at the traffic that you're getting from those social platforms. So just building a good website, essential. It's kind of table stakes today. But if you're not involved in the others, it won't give you all of the benefit that your online presence could.
Cool, thank you. In your experience, what are the top 3 most important benchmarks, and could you rank them?
Oh, I love that question, because when having done this report, like I say, hundreds of times and looked at thousands of companies, I find that a couple of things that really stand out on a recurring basis that I'm not sure I could say that there's a causation, but there's certainly a correlation in terms of the number of pages on your website, the number of visits to your website, and therefore the number of links to your website. So those all matter. How often am I being visited at a search? And how many times am I being linked to by other websites? And that link to by other websites might go to the top in terms of importance. And what you will find in dealing with SEO professionals and digital marketers is that link building is quite possibly, the #1 challenge we have, because you need good quality links. Just links from directories, just links from secondary or lower ranked websites than us, those aren't going to matter near as much to the Googlebot as being linked to by a high value site.
So Stephen, let me add on to that question then. I know as we've worked over the last year and a half to improve ALPFA's ranking and domain authority to kind of clean up our presence online, you've helped us with that professionally. So one of the things that I learned was the quality of the site's linking, and because we have corporate partners, the value of them linking to our site, and because our domain authority is high, ours linking to theirs, we're helping each other. So for our audience, whether they be someone who works for one of our corporate partners or for a potential corporate partner, whether they are perhaps one of our volunteers who's running their own chapter website or social media content, having those, not just a listing of corporate partners, but the link back to the corporate partner site from that logo. Those are the kinds of quality links that you're talking about.
Those are exactly the kind of links we're talking about, Lori. And you know, one of the things that's also a factor in the Google algorithm is not just the link, but the anchor text that accompanies it. It's good to have a graphic there, of course. But only if the graphic has an alt text, and that's a technical term for those of you not in marketing, but the alternative text attached to that image that describe the image, and then that links off to the site. Those are all factors. Now, are they the overwhelming factor? No, they're just one of the factors that needs to be addressed and should be paid attention to on a regular basis in terms of not only getting the link, but how's the alt text support that?
And then we had another question about the implications. What are the implications of a spam score for associations?
I love that.
We have some chapter leaders on the webinar. Matter of fact, I
well,
believe I saw Henry Montoya here. He's a amazing, one of our amazing marketing folks out of Chicago. So I was happy to see him on the webinar.
Yeah, well, you know, and if this is your question, Henry, then let me go ahead and go into that a little bit in terms of the spam score itself. So the spam score was recently introduced by our friends at Moz. And here's where staying on top of the research particulars really starts to matter. Because if it's the same old, we would have never changed what goes into our research, but the research changes based upon the tools, what they provide, and what's changing in the Google algorithm. So the good friends, our good friends at Moz have come up with this spam score metric, and it's calculated against 17 different elements. And it's things like if you've got a really large site but very few links. Well, that's a problem to Google. If you've got a site that has linking off the page, or excuse me, it has linking in the menu to another website versus the content on the site, those all matter. So it's things like that that you can pay attention to that don't take a lot to address, but they are signs of what constitutes a spam site. Now, you can get away with one or two of them. Less than 2% of the sites have 1 to 4 elements. But when you start getting up into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 17 different elements, now you start seeing yourself being dramatically penalized by Google to the point that you may never show up in search.
I was really pleasantly surprised when you first told us about the spam score, and our spam score was, I believe it was a 1, and I was like, is that like 1 to 10 good 1 or 1 to 10 bad 1? And so the lower the score in this case, the better. So if you happen to find, learn how to run your spam score, and
and that's available on Moz. So if you're a Moz user, it's part of that spam score. Research it, figure out what those components are, and try to keep them off the site. Again, knowing what they are is half the battle, right?
Right. Let's see. We have, what is, I'm sorry, where do you see companies struggle the most?
Oh, definitely well, there's 2 areas here. Number one that I was going to say is linking. I mean, finding good, valuable, high-quality links is a challenge for every single company on the planet, because you're not going to link to your competitors, right? But if you are a strong organization in one market or another, get strong links from the association. Get strong links from magazines or publications that talk about your industry. Those things matter. The second most important thing is content. Content. Digital marketers realize that it's becoming a content battle out there. I mean, that's really where the war's being fought, is around content. And if you're not posting content to your own and operated property on a periodic basis, that's a challenge. But number 2 is that if you are also not creating content for your social presence that drives traffic to your owned and operated property, you're dealing with another issue. So content, number 1, and that's content on-site as well as office, and then the linking behavior of the people that connect to you.
And Mr. Powell asks, on the typical investment level of clients using the service, what's the value they receive? That's a great question.
That's a great question, because a lot of the research that we've done has been funded by federal and state government organizations driving economic development. So what's the value proposition? Well, we've seen in several of the client organizations that they have increased their revenue, number 1. Number 2 is they've also improved their ability to hire in a territory or region. Those are important metrics when it comes to the economic development organizations. The companies themselves find that they get greater traffic, and when they get greater traffic, they're at least in consideration when those investments are made. I have clients that we've been working with for, now we haven't even hit the year mark with them, but we have consistently seen that A, they're showing up more often. And if they're showing up more often in search, that means that they get more phone calls. And those are the kinds of metrics that we use with those clients in terms of, are you getting visits? And if you are getting visits, are you getting requests for quotes? And if you're getting requests for quotes, how many of those turn into business? So those are the metrics that most often we have to look at. But with our work dealing at the top of the funnel, and that's the awareness factor. Our major metric is whether or not we're getting the additional visits, and we're getting the additional visits not only from our own media, which are direct visits, but are we also getting visits from people out of search? So those are the types of metrics that we try to look at.
Cool. And Andy asks, what industry verticals can best benefit from this approach?
I had a call yesterday with an organization out of Colorado that was a manufacturer. And you know, manufacturers and job shops and people that craft that kind of stuff, those guys are very niche-y. Oftentimes they're dealing with specific industries like medical or whatnot. Those guys have no other venue to market other than social. There just is none of their clients that are going to see a billboard, right? So that's where when you talk about industries that benefit most, I would say manufacturing is big on it. And those B2B industries that find themselves in what we call the long tail of search. And if you guys are marketers, you understand this long tail of search represents the majority of searches on the internet. We're not competing. Those guys are not competing with the searches about the political season, the elections that are coming up. They're not competing in the same category as people looking for Beyonce's new album. Those guys are definitely way out in the long tail, and those are the guys that really don't have an alternative.
Right. Fernando asks, do you see much difference between nonprofits versus B2B versus B2C?
The difference that we find with nonprofits is that their metric is oftentimes not based in just revenue. Their metric is oftentimes based in program delivery. So when we talk about program delivery, we can segment out a component of the research, and you would segment out a component of the research that indicates whether or not people are taking advantage of the programs you're offering. So that's the way that I would suggest that a nonprofit would probably want to enhance the research by including whether or not the programs that they're offering are being taken advantage of.
Excellent. And I'm checking Twitter as well as the
well, thanks, Lori.
well, it's been kind of interesting. And then I asked you about the industry verticals, and a similar question from Twitter: how many different kinds of companies listening in today? How many different kinds of companies? Banks, consumer products companies. There might be a part 2 to this tweet.
Sure.
What analytics should larger companies use?
Oh, I love that question. And you know, that's the type of question that we oftentimes approach with our enterprise tool. That's MarketSim, the market simulation tool. Mm-hmm. The market simulation tool allows us to consider really an extremely broad range of elements. And these are the types of things that I talked about earlier, that MarketSim is based on this model of consumer behavior that's extremely broad and uses a ton of data. It's a big data tool that allows us to sort of look at not 1, 5, 10, or 100 different elements, which is what our Preznc research looks at. It's 100 different elements, and then we look at that versus not only your Preznc, but those of all of the competitors identified. So that could be 500 items in a single research project, or it could be 10,000 items that are considered in a MarketSim project. So in our experience, in terms of using the types of tools that we have available, that's how I would sort of suggest those are considered.
Excellent. I think we have one more here. Giselle is asking, sure, when my company is sharing content or an article about the industry and I'm giving signs to my competitors, am I giving signs to my competitors of what my company is doing or its next strategy?
I love that question because
that's a great question.
That's where when it comes to our social presence, it's not the place to disclose our secret sauce. Right? It's not the place that we want to talk about the intellectual property that we as an organization manage and maintain. It's not the place that we talk about the patents that we're working on and giving away those things. That's not the place to do it, which is why it's so critical that we get them out of social and into our web and into our owned and operated property, because it's in our owned and operated property that we essentially get to control the conversation. And that's where we started looking at the deployment of tools like live chat. Live chat will allow someone to come out of social, go to our website, and start a conversation right away that's not on the web, that can't be intercepted by one of our competitors and can't be discerned by one of our competitors. Yes, they will see what we're doing in social, like we see what they're doing, right? But when it comes to that presence, we want to sort of move them. We understand, and now you all understand, that while the social presence is important in terms of engaging our audience, we want to move them to our owned and operated property so that we can have a private conversation with them.
And I found in my experience over the years in social, working with different companies in different industries and with different teams in those companies, often, Giselle, that the things that we talk about are the things that are of interest to our clients and to the influencers of our clients. So if you know that Stephen is someone who influences me and you were to have a conversation with him publicly on social media about something that's important to him and also something that's of importance to me, and I see you two engaging together, you come into my view. So it's a great way for you to gain attention in the marketplace and to become a thought leader. As you capture the attention of the other thought leaders, your credibility automatically goes up. And a follow-up question here, how do you minimize the negative communication that a finance company may have on social media? That's a great question, Stephen.
Oh, you know, and actually, Lori and I have had this conversation with some ALPFA partners, and the answer to the question for them oftentimes comes into compliance. I mean, that's the real challenge that we have with financial partners, is the compliance question. So what you do is you tend to work more aggressively with the compliance people, much deeper into the calendar, the editorial calendar, in terms of what are the conversations that are coming up. Now, here's the other thing, is that I'm going to encourage people to welcome those people into the conversation who aren't always positive, who might be detractors, because we're looking for a percentage. We're looking for an understanding as to whether or not our presence is actually serving the need of the customer. There's always going to be an off day. Always going to be an off day. You just can't stop people from having off days. We're people. But the other thing that we're looking at is not every day can be an off day. So if we're getting nothing but negative comments, that says something about the product or service, or perhaps the conversation that we're trying to instigate. If it's just a percentage, well, now we get to start managing that percentage. In a restaurant, for example, we understand that we're going to have servers and cooks that aren't serving the right meal or don't have the right skills for the day. Great. If we're seeing that a disproportionate number of times, then we need to act. But if it's just that off conversation, if it's just that off experience, we need to accept that that's the cost of doing business. And I wished I could give you something better than that. I just can't imagine what it would be, though.
Well, I like to correlate it to, you know, when I go into a department store and I'm standing at the customer service counter behind somebody who's there returning a product because they have a complaint about it and they're really upset about it. And that's just one customer and just one situation, but it's happening publicly. Well, on social media, that same kind of conversation happens. It happens more publicly, and a lot more people can see it. So if you address it and ask people, I mean, that's where the whole Comcast Cares thing went so viral, because their Twitter handle said, "We care." So when people asked questions or made complaints, they tried to address it quickly. You know, where is your location? Contact us here. Do these things. And so you can really direct people. And sometimes it's a matter of educating your audience about what their expectations should be about the product. But if you address those negative comments in the platform where the comment was made, and then take the conversation back to your owned and operated space that Stephen talked about, then you're going to have the opportunity to resolve that unsatisfied customer or somebody who has a negative thing to say, and you'll find that then other people will watch how you handle that negative comment and what you do for people, and they'll recognize, well, they really do care. They really do stand behind their product, and so everybody recognizes, like you said, the off day. Sadly,
and
people.
And Frank Eliason, who started Comcast Cares, I mean, this was back when Comcast had never heard about social media, right? And Frank Eliason opened it up. Frank Eliason was one of our interviews for the ROI of social media. So we don't have that interview on podcast. We do have it. We just haven't got it published right now. But it is in the book, The ROI of Social Media, and you can read Frank's comments about how this knit into the Comcast infrastructure and how it sort of started changing the Comcast culture in terms of Comcast Cares. So that's a great point, Lori.
I forgot about that interview being in the book. I remember reading it. Let me ask you a question too then, Stephen. Is the ROI of social media available digitally or on Kindle? Because I am, this is where I read most of my material.
Now, yeah.
I'm on my Note 4, and it's been an amazing machine. I've been monitoring it for text messages or anything. I sent a message out to all of our registrants before the webinar to contact me if they had any trouble. So I've been trying to monitor all the.
Has anybody had trouble?
No, nobody
Okay.
has. I've had a couple of text messages, but just the normal course of business kind of thing. We've had several questions via Twitter today. I'm very pleased with that. Several, lot of questions here right on the board.
But the answer to the question, is it available digitally, is yes. It's available anywhere you buy books. It's a hardback if you buy it ink on dead trees. That's my favorite way of talking about published books. Is you could buy it ink on dead trees. It's hardback. It's available at your local Barnes & Noble or any place. Amazon's got it. But you can also get it on your Kindle. You can also get it on Google Books. You can also get it on iTunes.
Oh, right.
It's available wherever you want.
Great. Thank you. I'm glad I asked the question.
And my partner and I, we certainly encourage you to get your copy today.
And so for those of you who have remained on the call, thank you so much for joining us today. Please reach out to me. You can reach me and my team at social@national.alpha.org. And let us know what kinds of webinars and what kinds of topics you're interested in, because we do want to serve you. I know it feels to me like it's taken us a while to get to this point. It's something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. And I appreciate your patience and joining and being aware of this. But Stephen is going to be offering a 20-minute consultation to one of our lucky attendees, and that attendee is attendee number 13 was the number I drew today. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. Thankfully, it wasn't too far down the list, and I could find it. And it was Giselle, Gisela Ortega Ramos. So Giselle, if you'll shoot me a note, I'll find your email among the emails here, and you'll be getting a consultation with Stephen, and I know that you'll enjoy that as much as I have spent my time with him. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, this is recorded, and it will be available for review again, along with the handouts on alpha.org. When you log into your member homepage, look under the news section, and you'll see the premium member webinars. So thank you very much for your time today, and happy April. One more quick announcement, convention.alpha.org, the convention registration went live yesterday. So on alpha.org homepage, you'll see the link there for the convention registration, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody.